Hi class, welcome to week 5. I have decided to work backwards from last week's argumentative essay and build out the lesson plan that would dovetail into that assignment. So again, this is an examination at the beginning of a U.S. history course, exploring the origins of the Declaration of Independence, diving into some of the grievances against King George III, and trying to get at this essential, beautiful question, to use last week's language, that is, who is the Declaration of Independence really for? In this assignment, students will investigate two historians' analyses of the Declaration of Independence. One who said it's this beautiful, idealistic document that is really speaking truth to power and giving a framework for all citizens of the New World. And in contrast, a historian who brings forth the argument that the Declaration of Independence was really, upon closer examination, some of the grievances really only speak to the American elite and this developing American aristocracy and new political class. So the title of my lesson plan is The Declaration of Independence for Whom? The standard, the state ELR Civics 1.1.1 analyzes and evaluates the ways in which the U.S. Constitution and other fundamental documents promote key ideals and principles, using the central focus ELA literacy 11th and 12th grade, point 6, evaluate authors' differing points of view on the same historical event or issue by assessing authors' claims, reasoning, and evidence, getting at this essential question of why did the Founding Fathers write the Declaration of Independence. So, looking at my academic language, I'm going to just jump for a second to my learning target, which says, I will analyze and determine whose concerns, the rich or everyone's, are reflected in the grievances against the kings. I will identify and explain the arguments of two historians' interpretations of the Declaration of Independence. And finally, I will argue and include evidence to state whom the Declaration of Independence benefits most. So, looking at those three pairs of verbs, in my language function, I broke those down with steps. So, analyze and determine who the grievances were for. So the steps to do that, I will have pre-assigned 10 of the selected grievances of the dozens against King George III that are included in the Declaration of Independence. And as table groups, students are going to decide whose concerns are represented in each of those grievances. So the breakdown steps to analyze and determine, students will read, annotate, and discuss as table groups in order to come to consensus about each of the 10 grievances. They'll write an A next to grievances they believe are impacting all of the citizens, and an O next to those only impacting the American political elite. For identify and explain the historian's arguments, the steps to do that, students will again read and annotate two competing historians' analyses about the purpose and intent behind the Declaration of Independence. Then students will find direct evidence from either the preamble of the Declaration or the 10 selected grievances to find supporting evidence for each of the historians' arguments. And then they will themselves argue and include, which is building towards that larger argumentative assignment from last week. Students will compose a one paragraph, 3 to 4 sentences summary. This is basically going to serve as a preview. It will be the check for understanding and the exit ticket for this class period, but it's leading them towards a sketch of what their larger argument will be for that 500-word essay. So they'll use the beginning parts, the first half of the DARE framework. So they'll develop a thesis statement, that is, which historian's analysis they agree with, and add evidence from either the preamble or some of the 10 grievances list to support. Additionally, students will incorporate at least one of the pre-teach vocabulary words until their culminating paragraph. And this is one of the post-language supports that I have built into the final check for understanding. So those language supports, I have the pre, during, and post outline. The pre will begin with the pre-teach of the specific legalese and critical vocabulary that are found in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. So my task for the students will be ask them to skim the text and underline the 7 words that I have listed up on the board, and draw lines out to the margins from each of those words and include the 1 to 2 word definition that I have given them. Then students will, as a part of our first step, students will listen and watch a reading that a series of 8 actors do, a YouTube video of the preamble. And so they will be listening for those words and trying to make more sense of the context as they listen and read through the preamble with those definitions. So during language supports, we have share out with the whole group understanding of those words in context. So students will share out their understandings of what the preamble is saying after we watch the YouTube video. Then students independently will rewrite and synthesize their own meaning of the preamble, second paragraph, line 2. They will be reading and annotating historians' arguments. They'll be analyzing and determining the benefits of the 10 grievances, as I've already mentioned, and they'll connect evidence from the preamble or the grievances to support the arguments of the 2 historians. And at the conclusion, students will utilize all of these activities and language supports to begin the DARE argumentative framework, develop a student argument in support of one of the historians, and incorporate the evidence, at least one of the new vocabulary words, into that synthesis paragraph. My 7 vocabulary words that I've pulled out to examine are dissolve, which means to disappear, impel, which is a verb meaning to force, self-evident, which means obvious, endowed, which means given, unalienable, cannot be taken away, deriving, which means getting, and consent, which means agreement. So again, we'll begin with the pre-teach of these definitions. They'll be up on the whiteboard. Students will be asked to skim and annotate in the margins with these definitions on the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. There's lots of opportunity for varied discourse throughout this lesson. We begin with the whole group discussion and review of the Declaration of Independence, any prior knowledge. Then the whole group reading/listening, then discussing along with the pre-teach of the vocabulary in the preamble. Then students will shift to the table group focus of the lesson, where they will be reading, annotating, and analyzing the preamble. At this point, they will be rereading the preamble for at least a second time. They'll be going over the 10 grievances together, as well as the 2 historians' analyses. Those are a couple of paragraphs each. Additionally, we will return at the conclusion of class for a whole group dialogical discourse about the lesson, and to get a sense of what connections students made from the primary source document evidence, the grievances, and the preamble, and how they connected those to the historians' arguments. And lastly, as far as academic language and language demands are concerned, my syntax. So the micro syntax has to do with a framework that I have adopted from some of my history mentor teachers in Washington, D.C., as well as some of the work that I did with the News Literacy Project, which was all about dissecting and analyzing the veracity of sources and information. And that framework is as follows. It is skim, annotate, analyze, compare, contrast, connect to evidence, and then evaluate. So my students will hopefully be familiar with the framework at this point. This lesson probably falls within the first few weeks of school, so this might be one of the first times that we're really applying it. But I think this is a great way to get students to remove their initial opinions about an issue or a topic that they may or may not have prior knowledge about, and build towards their evaluative opinion and stance on it after very careful consideration. And lastly, the macro-organizational framework for macro syntax is that students will be asked to consider the impact of this question, who the Declaration of Independence benefits most, and think about the impacts that such a question like that has on the state of our country 241 years later, and how understanding those issues of power and who benefits from the structure of our country, how those questions are answered today.